I grew up in the church, and I went to church with my parents were ministers, and so the church was always a huge part of my life. And I came to a point in my life, probably in my 20s, after serving in church, and always loved Jesus, but I had just been hurt by some things in the church, and I think I just kind of came to a place where I didn't really want a lot to do with it. And so when I met Scott, we've been married now 17 years. When I met him, part of it, this is terrible, but part of the attraction to him was that he didn't want to be a missionary, and he didn't want to be an evangelist, and he didn't want to be a youth minister. And I was like, oh, that's horrible. But that was the truth. I just had come to a place where I loved Jesus, and I always loved Jesus, but I wasn't really seeking out being equally yoked, I guess we should say. So anyway, so that was kind of my background with the church.
I grew up with wonderful parents, and we only went to church on Easters and Christmases and big holidays most of the time. Wonderful people, Christian people, especially now, but for some reason I never connected to the church. I always went out of anger and spite, never in a negative way, but just something a teenager fighting his parents and just rebelling against it, probably through my whole life. Even once I met Heidi, I went to church with her, and we even came to Neon Life and connected a little bit, loved the music, loved the messages that were being said, but for some reason I never was able to genuinely connect with people. I think for anxiety reasons, for other things, I was just simply disconnected from church my whole life.
Well, we've been married 17 years in November. 17 years in November. Yeah. And when I met Scott, fell head over heels in love with him. He's pretty easy to fall in love with. And but I never made Scott a priority, and wasn't making God a priority and putting God first in our marriage. Put the kids, once the kids came along, they were a huge priority first. My career and going back to school and kind of moving all of that along was a huge priority. And I kept thinking, with Scott and our marriage, this is just a season, and then he'll be more of a priority.
So throughout our entire marriage, as Heidi said, we've been married almost 17 years. I felt like we always put our children first. We always put each other first. And although we went to church, God was never the first piece of our lives at all, ever. Yeah. And just in the fall of, what year was that? 2020? 2020. Yes. And throughout our marriage, an addiction that I had, and decisions that were made because of that, literally broke the trust in our marriage completely, to the point of complete disconnection between us. I was asked to leave the home. I was too embarrassed to go anywhere, to ask for help at all. I wasn't willing to admit that I had done something wrong. I wasn't willing to admit the addiction that I had. And I just wanted to fix it. Not having God and trying to do that independently from anyone else only sent me into a deep, deep spiral of crazy, is the only way to put it, I think.
Yeah.
Police were involved at some point. I was living in my truck for a lot of that time. I still was working as a teacher, but yet had a completely different life once I left work that no one knew about. I was totally trying to manipulate the situation independently without anybody else's help. And every morning I would get up and try something different, or have a new plan, or something else to say or do, either with my kids or with Heidi, in hopes that I could repair it. But I could see in her eyes that she had just written me off, I felt like.
Yeah, I came to a place where I was just done completely with our marriage, and I was just ready to move on. And it was funny. It was like that was almost the people that I was hearing guidance from had, you know, my best interest at heart, but it was just get a divorce. It's fine. It's fine. God is totally cool with you getting a divorce. Just get a divorce. Just be done. You're done. You know, you've been hurt. You're done. So I was done. And we put the house on the market, and our house sold within 24 hours, and everything just was going so fast.
We were in the midst of just a dark place where it was constant fights, constant arguments, broken things in the house. Never any physical violence, I hope not.
No.
But just darkness and horribleness with every conversation, with everything that was going on. Every day it happened. Every hour, every minute, it was constant.
My phone was blowing up at work of him just sending me text messages just constantly, just because he was just reaching, trying to figure out how he could fix this and say, and he wanted to save our marriage, and I'm thankful for that, but it just pushed me further and further away. I was just more and more just like, no, I'm done. And my heart was just so hardened to him.
I think that when you realize you're losing the only thing that you have, when you don't have God, and when you don't have real friends that you can connect with like that, when you don't have anything else, or what you feel like you don't have anything else, and your family is sitting in the home that you're not allowed to go to, that it makes you, first of all, regret every decision that you've made that put yourself in that position. But second, sent me into the lowest place I've ever been. So as I was struggling from the bottom, from the worst I've ever been, I feel like, rather than reach for the things that I feel like I was addicted to, and rather than struggle to try to manipulate a situation, through my mom sending me messages that were verses of scripture, is probably the only person that reached out to me from that perspective with that. At that point, I just started to read just a little bit. And at that point of brokenness, like where you feel like you don't have anything, like nothing that you have in your life is yours anymore, that you love and want to be with, verses of scripture started to make sense. And I started to see it and relate for the first time in my life, that it was real, and I heard it, and every time I opened it, like I felt like I was being spoken to. And I sat at a church one night in the rain. I'm surprised the police didn't come and pick me up, because I had to have been creepy looking. But and just prayed. Probably the first like real prayer that said, I don't want to manipulate. I can't do this. You know what I mean? For the first time in my life, I became not the selfish man I think that I was. And a peace came over me immediately, I feel like. As a few days later, I sat with my daughter when she told me that she didn't want to live with me through the divorce that we were planning. And that's a hard pill to swallow when something like that happens. I even had to tell her, Addison, I just need a minute just to hear that. And I realized that I had no control. Through that time, coming to Neon Life, I was able to connect with a couple of men from this men's group as I was struggling, still living in my truck. Never told a soul that, but that's what my life was consistent of at the time. And it literally pulled me out of a men's breakfast after I spoke 12 words, never really said what was going on. And they knew it, they could see it on my face. And I'm forever thankful for men who listened to God at that moment instead of falling into conversations about eggs and bacon, which was happening as well. And that literally stood around me and prayed, and you could feel God. You could just feel it. And from that moment, I stopped trying. I just stopped trying, and I prayed every time, all day long. I never turned off Matthew West. I never turned off Zach Williams. And I just prayed that God would heal Heidi's heart, and that over time that we'd be able to find a way back together.
Yeah, and that's when he said, so jumping back to where it was, that's when he said, I'm coming home, because we only had a couple more weeks left in the house. And so he comes home, and I'm mad that he's there, and I hear him night after night just broken, just crying, and listening to Matthew West and all these worship guys that he had just kind of been dependent on, that Addison had introduced him to, and you just hear him, and I think, oh, he's faking it. Like, look at him faking it, and I was just so angry. But it was like, again, night after night after night, I started like going, can you really just fake that? I mean, and he stopped playing the games. He stopped trying to put the pressure on me. He was like, I'll help you do whatever you need to do, whatever we need to do to help you move, because he finally had decided, come to terms with, I got to get a place to live for my kids, and I had my place to live, and he's like, I'll help you do whatever we need to do. Well, and it just, he came to that. Then it was interesting because we got sick around Christmas, and with COVID and all the things going on, we weren't able to go and be with our families at Christmas. We were all kind of trapped in the house together for a couple weeks. And I think that God used that time to just continue for me to see that he was different. I mean, he was truly different. And
one of the most incredible things that were happening was, first of all, I hid. I didn't mean for people to like hear me crying. I would hide in the laundry room and turn on the washing machine. I would go to my truck. I would go in the garage late at night, and none of that was for show. I tried to hide, but I wasn't willing to leave my home to do it. I wanted to be there with my family.
Yes, I think that's important.
But something else through that 2-week period of time, medically things started to really happen as well. Heidi had a gallbladder attack late at night one night, and forced us to connect when I was on the couch or probably in the garage or in the laundry room crying. This medical emergency happened, I feel like, that forced us to be together and interact with each other, and for me to help out. Addison, our daughter, was going through some things as well too, and even at church during that time we went. Heidi actually agreed to go. I was trying to just get my kids to go and never expected her to.
And in my mind, I think it was almost like, we're going to go to church together. This is kind of like our last time to all go to church together. Here, we're still in the house now. We'll go to church together, and then we'll go on. He goes to his house and I go to my house. And that was really kind of like my final, like, yeah, let's go to church together, because I knew he'd been going and it had been good, and I thought, okay, we'll all go together. Go ahead.
So we're there, and the fabulous music at Neon Life. I was worshiping. I literally was in the best place. I had my family at church. I feel like I had made steps to remove myself from manipulation and all the things that I was trying to do, and I was just leaning on God. That's it. And all of a sudden, my daughter, standing right beside me, falls down. And I thought she was praying for a second. It took me a couple seconds to see that. But as she falls down to her knees, and it passed out completely in church due to the struggle that she was going through, probably because of us.
Yeah.
And the things that were happening to her. And now medically, she was in a very bad place. The ambulance came and took her. She went to Cook Children's, and luckily recovered perfectly. She's doing wonderful now. But But these things happened that forced us to depend and draw on God, to pray together, and then forced us to come together too, when we would have not been together at all. And so I don't know how to say that in an appropriate way, but I feel like God was putting us together for a reason, even through tragedy, that there was opportunities for us to reconnect, even if it wasn't with each other, just as a family.
Well, when I rode with Addison in the ambulance to the hospital, and when I got to the hospital, you know, there's times in your life when you know God is speaking something so clearly, and it was there's only, you know, those few times where you just know without a doubt that was from God, because that wasn't me. My heart wasn't ready to say those things, but it was just so clear. He just said, Heidi, he's doing everything you could ask him to do. Why would you not give him another chance? Why would you not try? And from that moment forward, I thought, I gotta do what I gotta do. I gotta do what's best for my family, and I gotta do what's best for him. I mean, because I love him, and I wanted to make our marriage work. And so, it all just went away. In that moment, I just knew, like, we got to work on this. We got to fix this. And so that was a huge moment for me. I think I came back and said to you, I don't want you to live in your apartment. I want you to come with us. You know, we need to be together. And so, I mean, that really to me was the moment of just, we can do this. But there's no other explanation except for Jesus.
Something I think that was a huge impact on me is that when I genuinely surrendered to God and stopped trying myself, I was praying a prayer that was really small compared to what happened. I was asking for Heidi's heart to be healed. I was asking for our family to find time to then reconnect. Nowhere in my prayer did I ever ask God to piece us back together immediately. So what a lesson in praying big, I feel like, and asking for things that you really, really want, because I didn't know God enough to know to pray for that. I was praying for Heidi, for my wife, for my kids' hearts, thinking that this is a consequence of my actions and that I want to make the best of the situation. And yet, God way surpassed that, without question in my mind. And there's just not a question. I feel like that He was there for us when we needed it, when I called out and when I cried out night after night. I felt heard. I felt it with chill bumps down my arms. When I turned on the music, when I read the Bible, when I came to Neon Life, when I connected with men's group and those guys reached out to me in times that were the minute that I needed it, when I had just fallen to my knees, or when I had just opened up a scripture, my phone rang with some of those guys. And that doesn't happen. That's God Himself. And so seeing that take place in your own life at 42 years old is pretty remarkable. There's not a thing that goes by day to day now that I don't see differently, that I don't feel differently. My son calls me new dad.
Yeah.
In kind of a disrespectful tone, maybe. But every time he says it, I see it as such a remarkable change in me that he notices that I'm literally a new person. And that's something that only God can do. And it makes me so excited to start our family again with God first.
Yeah.
And church first.
We pray together now. We've never in our marriage had we ever said a prayer together, except maybe at the dinner table. I don't remember any other time. Well, maybe when
the kids were born.
But yeah, I mean, that's it. And maybe at nighttime we would say night prayers with the kids, you know, just kind of formality, but never just Scott and I praying together
For
and for
us.
each other. And and we've been, we're not perfect, but we've been reading a lot of books together and sharing the marriage group that we did through Neon Life. The home group was phenomenal for us because it just came around the perfect time that we needed it, and we were able to kind of have that accountability of, we're going to read these chapters and we're going to share together. And it was just, it's good. We're just at just such a new place. Like, he's so new, he's so different. He's what I always really did want and hope and prayed for, ideally. And I always knew it was in him. I always knew if God ever, I have so many people have said that to me too, if God ever got a hold of Scott, he would do some great things for the Lord. And anyway, I'm thankful. I'm thankful that God can heal our hearts.
I think the thing that connected me to Neon Life, first of all, the genuine nature of the leaders of the church, but more importantly, the people and the willingness to reach out and to connect with people that needed help at that moment. As I was walking out of church, a tap on the shoulder reminded me that I could call someone, a husband, somebody else, was more impactful than they'll ever know.
Yeah.
And then that person leading me to somebody else and not just leaving me hanging when I needed it. I didn't tell them that I was living in my truck. I didn't tell them all the details that was going on, but yet they saw it, and they were willing to take the time to make sure that I had what I needed, and I was in the right place, seeking the right people and around godly people. And it just continued. One person led to another, and they were all part of Neon Life Church, and they were all invested in Neon Life Church. And for me, I've never seen sincerity in men like that before, or openness in men like that before, to be willing to just open their hearts and to admit their faults and to see those pieces and to be willing to admit those pieces it's refreshing. And never have I been involved in a situation like that. And to me, that's what Neon Life is real people. Never in my whole life have I really felt in my heart of hearts that Jesus had a real direct impact in my life. And that's really sad to say, because I know that he has now, looking back, and all the things that have happened and all the things I've been blessed with. But through this challenge or dark place in our life, I feel like you realize how, in my moment of like brokenness, when I had nothing else and nobody to turn to, like, God heard my prayer. Like, I have no doubt in my mind that when I was crying out to God, I was heard. I felt it in my body. I saw it in my life, and I have this miracle now of my family to show for it. But more importantly, in me, I feel like, he took away, literally in moments, the addiction that had been like running my life. You know what I mean? Honestly, that I was able to.
How old did you say?
Since I was, 14 or 15 years old, that made decisions in my life where I avoided people because of that. You know what I mean? Like, it just went away. And for me, it was like my eyes opened for the first time. You know what I mean? That I would go spend time with my wife or my kids, where I would have gone to a different place. You know what I mean? At that moment. And that to me is remarkable, because it's something you couldn't do on your own. You know what I mean? It was impossible for me to do that on my own. And until I cried night after night for God to just take it all, that I have no control over it, he listened. I have no doubt that he was sitting beside me every night when I was there. And I've never felt that before in my life, and I'll never forget it. And it makes me excited to share this story for people that need to hear it as well.